Have you ever imagined being approached by a complete stranger and being told, in no uncertain terms, "You're my mother"? That's exactly what happened to Laura, a lonely woman, scarred by an old secret that she believed was buried forever. But fate, as always, had other plans. This story begins unpretentiously in a common square on any given day. But what seemed like a random encounter ended up revealing an inexplicable connection, a mystery from the past, and a bond capable of defying time, logic, and even the heart itself. At every step, Laura finds herself involved in something greater than she could have imagined, a reunion between mother and son, sealed by a feeling that is impossible to fake. Leave your comment below. Do you believe in destiny? Have you ever experienced an inexplicable connection like this? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more inspiring real stories. Get ready to be moved by an inspiring true story, with touching twists and turns, and an ending that will warm your heart. After all, there are encounters that are not by chance, and loves that not even time can erase. Stay until the end, because what this boy revealed will change everything. Laura was one of those women who arrived before the bell rang and only left school when silence filled the hallways. A dedicated music teacher, 39 years old, few knew the sad melodies she carried in her chest. Lonely by choice, or perhaps out of fear, she filled her days teaching children to play the flute and sing in a choir, but her heart skipped a beat whenever she remembered the past. After work, Laura cultivated an almost ritualistic habit. She would sit on the same bench in the neighborhood square, always with a book of poetry or sheet music on her lap. She watched the world move as if waiting for something or someone that never arrives. She had no children, husband, or even nephews around. Her only constant companion was the guilt that visited her every night, silent and faithful like an old acquaintance. Despite the affection of her students and the friendliness of her neighbors, Laura never opened up completely. Those who knew her by sight described her as kind but distant, as if the music she played for others was a wall to protect an old wound. And there, in that square of worn benches and leafy trees, she found temporary peace without imagining that she was about to experience the most profound upheaval of her life. It was an ordinary afternoon. The sun filtered through the branches of the trees, and Laura barely noticed the time passing as she absent-mindedly read a passage by Vinicius de Moraes. It was then that she felt a pair of curious eyes watching her. She looked up and saw a boy standing a few steps away, small, skinny, with dark hair and a serious expression. He said nothing. He just looked at her, as if he knew her from somewhere. Before she could say anything, he broke the silence with a sentence that pierced the air like an arrow. "You are my mother." Laura froze. She didn't know what to say. Her voice trailed off for a moment. She smiled awkwardly, thinking that perhaps it was a bad joke or the overactive imagination of a needy child. But there was something in that boy's gaze that disarmed her. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to remain calm. He just smiled and said, "Daniel." The naturalness with which he spoke moved Laura in a strange way. Even without understanding what was happening, she felt her heart race. His sudden approach seemed absurd, but for some reason also strangely familiar, and it would make her restless for the next few days. Minutes after the unexpected "You're my mother," a woman in a simple uniform rushed in calling Daniel's name. "Sorry, he usually sneaks out. He keeps saying he's going to find his mother." The employee explained that he lived in a nearby orphanage and had a habit of disappearing and making up stories. Laura just nodded, but inside, something had been planted, and it was already growing. The next day, as if it were a script that had already been written, Daniel returned. Same square, same bench, same look. "Hi, Mom," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And the next day, too. Laura began to find herself waiting for him, as if she were waiting for a miracle. Despite the absurdity of the situation, there was a tenderness there that was impossible to ignore. She tried to rationalize, but her heart had already anticipated it. As the afternoons went by, Daniel began to sit next to her, telling her stories about school and asking to learn songs. Laura, who had always kept her emotional distance from people, found herself smiling more, returning home with her thoughts fixed on that little boy. It was an inexplicable connection, as if something very old and dormant was trying to wake up, and she didn't know whether to resist or to give in completely. After one of those afternoons with Daniel, Laura sought out her longtime friend, Mariana. Between sips of coffee, the words began to slip out. "Mari, remember that summer when everything changed?" It was the first time in years that she had spoken about it. At 17, Laura became pregnant after a brief and turbulent relationship. Her mother, strict and concerned about appearances, decided for her the baby would be given up for adoption. No questions asked, no room for debate. Laura never got to hold her son in her arms. Everything was sorted out by lawyers and doctors while she was still recovering from the birth. The pain remained there, buried under years of silence and routine. She never spoke about it to anyone other than Mariana, and even then, in scattered fragments, as if she were trying to sweep the memory under the rug. But now, that boy in the square seemed to pull that past back with force. "What if it's him?" Laura whispered, more to herself than to her friend. Mariana held her hand firmly, with no easy answers. What Laura felt wasn't just longing for something she never experienced. It was guilt. It was regret. It was love, frozen in time. And maybe, just maybe, life was offering her a chance to start over. But the fear of deluding herself still paralyzed her. In the days that followed, Laura could no longer sleep peacefully. Each sentence Daniel said echoed like a call that was impossible to ignore. Logic screamed that it was a coincidence, but her heart, oh her heart, insisted on another path. She began to put the pieces together, trying to match dates, ages, and even physical features. "Is it possible?" she murmured, staring at old photos that she had never had the courage to tear up. Driven by this inner turmoil, she decided to take action. She went to the orphanage and volunteered during her free afternoons, claiming she wanted to teach music to the children. The director, surprised and grateful, accepted. Inside, Laura remained discreet but attentive. She talked to the staff, created bonds with the little ones, and, little by little, gathered information about Daniel. Her heart almost stopped when she heard that he had been left as a baby at the door of the institution without any clue as to who had left him. The story was painfully familiar. The timing matched almost exactly the birth of the child she had been forced to give up. There were no documents, no last name, just a newborn wrapped in a blue blanket with an illegible note. From that moment on, Laura began to feel that this was not just a coincidence. It was fate whispering truths that she was not yet ready to face, but that she could no longer ignore. With each afternoon at the orphanage, the bond between Laura and Daniel became more evident and harder to hide. He would run to her as soon as he saw her arrive, hugging her as if years of longing were compressed into that gesture. He called her Mommy so naturally that the other volunteers found it funny. For Laura, it was both painful and warming at the same time, a bittersweet mix of doubt, love, and hope. She began to bring him books with adventure stories and simple instruments, a tambourine, a harmonica, a recorder. They would sit together under a tree in the courtyard, and he would cheer with each new note he learned. Laura was gradually becoming the role model he never had. The once solitary music teacher now taught him songs with a sparkle in her eyes, and with a care that transcended any volunteer role. The days began to have a different rhythm. She found herself thinking about him all the time, preparing activities just to please him. Daniel, in turn, insisted on asking if he could go away with her, if everything was all right to live together. That broke her heart. Laura wanted to say yes. She wanted to take that sensitive boy home and protect him from the world. But there was still one piece missing, the truth. And she knew she could not put off this search for much longer. It wasn't long before Laura and Daniel's relationship began to draw attention within the orphanage. The director, although kind, called her in for a serious talk. "Laura, you are overstepping the boundaries of a volunteer. We need to look after the children's well-being and maintain clear rules." She tried to explain herself, but deep down she knew she was mixing up her feelings. And more than that, she was allowing herself to be guided by something that not even she fully understood. The breaking point came when, on impulse, Laura took Daniel to buy a book outside of the permitted hours without prior authorization. The infraction was enough to temporarily remove her from visiting. "Until further notice, we ask that you do not return to the institution," the director informed, with regret. Laura's world fell apart at that moment. She returned home in silence, hugging the book that Daniel had chosen as if it were a piece of her. The following nights were torment. She cried in silence, staring at the ceiling, reliving every moment with the orphan boy who might have been her lost son. Doubts gnawed at her. What if it was all just a cruel coincidence? What if she was deluding herself out of need or guilt from the past? But something inside her told her that she wasn't crazy. It was an ancient, deep intuition that required courage. And Laura, even though she was afraid, knew that she could no longer run away from the truth. Determined to face her past, Laura sought out the hospital where she had given birth 22 years earlier. After some refusals and bureaucracy, she managed to contact Mrs. Eunice, a former employee of the maternity ward, now retired. The woman, moved by Laura's request, rummaged through old files that she had kept with care. "You had a boy, and you left a necklace with the baby. Remember that?" Laura burst into tears. She did remember, and she would never forget. With this clue in hand, Laura set off for the orphanage. She asked an administrative assistant for help and, with care, began to cross-reference information. Dates, characteristics, the note left behind, and the final piece, the necklace. Daniel arrived at the orphanage with a small necklace wrapped in his diaper, the same one she had left in his crib years ago. Laura's heart raced. The pieces were finally fitting together, one by one, like a puzzle written by destiny itself. The confirmation was accompanied by a deep silence. There was no more room for doubt. Daniel was her son. The sensitive child who had appeared out of nowhere saying, "You are my mother," had been right all along. It was as if maternal love had found a way to scream, even after years of distance. Laura took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief, guilt, and joy. From that moment on, her mission was clear: to bring him back into her arms. With her documents in hand and her heart pounding, Laura returned to the orphanage. This time, not as a volunteer or visitor, but as a mother. She presented everything to the director: records, certificates, photos, and of course, the necklace. The man was visibly moved. After the initial formalities, the adoption process was authorized to proceed. "There are still steps to go through," he said. But for Laura, this was the beginning of a new life, and this time, she did not intend to fail. Daniel was called into the room without knowing what it was about. When he saw Laura, he ran to her, as he always did, but he noticed that there was something different in her gaze. She knelt down, held his hands, and said softly, "You were right. I am your mother." The boy's eyes widened. Then he smiled broadly and hugged her so tightly that it seemed like he wanted to make up for lost time with that gesture. "I knew it. My heart always knew it," he murmured, without letting go of her. It was a scene that paralyzed everyone present. Employees, children, even the director. Everyone was moved. Laura and Daniel, mother and son, finally together, no longer by intuition or desire, but by truth. And the most beautiful thing is that, even without knowing it, the two had already chosen each other a long time ago. The signature on the papers was just a detail. What united them was something greater, an emotional bond, maternal love, and a moving story that defied destiny itself. A few months later, Laura and Daniel were walking together through the same square where it all began. Only now, they were holding hands, with knowing smiles and plans in their pockets. He already called her Mom without hesitation, and she responded with a look full of pride and love. The loneliness that had previously filled their days had now been replaced by laughter, toys scattered around the house, and flute lessons played in duet. During an interview for the adoption process, Laura was asked about everything she had experienced. With tears in her eyes, she replied, "Life can take turns, yes, but true love always finds its way back." It was difficult to explain how an orphan boy and a lonely woman could recognize each other without knowing the past that united them. But perhaps some stories don't need logic, just the heart. And now, tell me honestly, do you believe that bonds of true love can resist time, silence, and even absence? This story between Laura and Daniel reminds us that even in the most unlikely circumstances, the heart recognizes what reason cannot explain. How many times have you felt that something or someone was part of your life before you even understood why? Could it be that there is also, inside you, some unresolved story, a reconnection that time has not yet allowed? Think about it. Sometimes the truth is closer than we think. We just have to listen with our hearts. If this story touched you in any way, leave your comment below. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who also believes in the power of reunion. And answer in the comments, have you ever had an inexplicable connection with someone? What was it like?